Game begin.
Hello and welcome to Spike Colony. We're back after a week break. I am here with one of the biggest Taylor Swift fans in Magic the Gathering, Michael J. Flores, and I'm
not
Lanny
even
Huang.
the biggest Taylor Swift fan.
There's
got to call.
It's true.
If you go by dollars spent, when I played
Euros spent actually.
With Pro Tour Vancouver, Taylor Swift was playing the weekend of Pro Tour Vancouver, and I was actually going through a rough emotional spell. I could have had floor seats for $25, so I elected not to go. Whereas dozens of Magic the Gathering Pro Tour players who, aren't actually really big Taylor Swift fans just ended up going, and they came to day 2 just decked out in Taylor Swift gear, or maybe I think it was day 2 or day 3, and I mean, and I never heard the end of it, where it's just like I just didn't go. And instead, it was weird to me that Taylor couldn't sell out Vancouver in 2015. Now she's selling out Munich from New Yorkers.
Yeah.
Right? So you're flying to Munich, VIP style. Are you taking Ryan?
Of course, I'm doing it for both of us. Ryan loves Taylor Swift too. So Ryan, my wife.
You and Ryan are going, and
are you coming with? I got 4 ticks.
Did you really?
Yeah, I got 4 tickets.
No, I'm not gonna go.
You're not gonna go? The daughter doesn't want to go fly to Munich with your strange 30-year-old man friend.
Offline this conversation.
They're only $700. Okay, that was hype. I got tickets to Taylor Swift. It was a slog. The story's actually kind of funny. Like, you have to pre-register, get this code, get in the queue, finish the queue, get into the ticket buying page. Get to the ticket buying page, try to add tickets to your cart. Every single time you click add to cart, they just disappear. They're like, oh, sorry, those tickets are available. So you try to add different ones to your cart. So
they're disappearing for good reason.
Yeah. So but what's happening is that it's just flipping on and off. So basically it'll just be different tiers of tickets, right? Let's call them tier 1 through 10. So you'll refresh the page and it'll be 4, 7, and 8 have 4 tickets available. So you're just click on the first one you see and just try to add them to your cart. And they're like, oh, sorry, those tickets are no longer available. But then all of a sudden it's 1, 3, and 2 are available. So you try to add those to cart. And then as soon as you click it, it says they're gone. So people are basically the tickets are just on and offing because people are adding it to their cart, looking at the tickets, but being I don't want those, I want something else, and then clicking a different one. Either that or the site's broken. But anyways, I already waited 30 minutes in the queue. I have no idea how much supply is left. So I was just this is a dangerous situation. Let's just tab over the VIP packages and see what's up. I go to the VIP packages. The VIP packages don't have explanations. They're just called the Wish You Were Here Unforgettable Experience VIP package, the Lover VIP package, the Blank Space VIP. I'm I don't know what any of this means. So I'm I have to click one to figure out what it means. So I just clicked the first one. And the first one I clicked was the 650 euro floor seat, full you get everything package. And then so I'm sitting there and I have
to meet Taylor?
No,
650 euro?
No, nobody.
There's no way. This doesn't seem expensive enough.
Yeah. Nobody gets to meet Taylor. Anyways, I have it in my cart and it's we're holding these tickets for you for 10 minutes, right? And I'm I have a decision to make. Either I shell $700 for these VIP tickets, or I have to go back and try my luck. And I was one in the hand is better than 2 in the bush. So that's how I ended up getting 4 VIP tickets to Taylor Swift in Munich. That's you can't get them in the US, can't get them in Mexico. She did just announce Canada. So if you're a Taylor Swift fan, you're listening to this podcast, keep your eye out for getting on the fan pre-sale for the Canada dates. Thank you, Justin Trudeau.
Maybe I'll make up for not going in Vancouver back in 2015.
And go in Vancouver in 2023. That is actually
one of the great errors I made. So I was sad because I missed an Eidolon trigger on day 1, and it ended up costing me the top 8 of the Pro Tour. That's why I was sad.
Fair enough.
So one Eidolon trigger cost me the top.
Same weekend or what?
Yes.
So you did the 2 biggest punts of your Magic career and life
in one weekend.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yeah, but can you imagine me? I missed an Eidolon trigger, and it cost me a Pro Tour top 8.
Yeah, I missed.
That is really, really one Eidolon trigger, and I was just I was mad. I was grousing. I lost to this Abzan deck in the last round of day 1, right? And I'm just oh man, I was winning. You drew 3, he drew 3 Siege Rhinos off, and like he just lets me grouse. And he's just like, you missed an Eidolon trigger on turn 2. And I looked back and I was just like, you're right. I am so sorry for complaining. Good match. And then, I mean, like, but he just let me grouse. And
just sitting
and then
back.
he's just like, you missed an Eidolon trigger, master red decks.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I make day 2, right? And I'd lost to Andrew Cuneo to go X1 in the first draft. Then I beat Andrew the first round of Standard. I'm on like a run. I won a bunch of good matches. Day 2, I beat the guy who made my deck, Sam Black, in the Red Deck Mirror. You can watch that match. I beat the limited master of my team, who was Ben Stark, on day 1. Right? So I'd done a lot of things good, but I missed that Eidolon trigger, and it made me not make the top.
All right, here's my biggest mistake of my Magic career. I went 3rd at the North American Premodern Championship. And do you know what happens after you get 3rd at the North American Premodern Championship?
Get invited to the PSS.
And you know what happens after that?
You pick terrible decks.
You tank. And no, my decks are good. My decks are so
terrible
good
compared to the decks you're capable of picking.
No. Okay. First of all, we're going to tank because of the curse and not because of the deck selection. Okay. The deck selection is super good. I almost can't explain to you why the deck selection is so good because I don't want to turn my competitors onto my strategy.
Okay, I mean, we're gonna inevitably talk about this.
All right, let's start. Let's start from the beginning.
I will say this to you. I also thought my decks were good in the middle of the PSS last year.
All of my decks, one, I'm a god.
Violating your own rule, right?
I'm a god. I'm god tier player at all 3 of my decks. Like I truly believe that I am amongst the best players on the planet with the 3 decks that I played, and that is not true with any other 3 decks. With the exception, of course.
I think you're just like a good parfait player.
What's that?
You're probably one of the best parfait players in the world.
That's what I'm claiming.
Yeah, this like Burning Wish parfait deck. I mean, just like a parfait deck that you put thousands of hours into. I'm talking about.
Oh well, the Burning Wish parfait.
A transferable skill thing.
It's like even better because like the Burning Wish parfait deck is just. Okay, let's go ahead and start from the top for the listener's sake. Premodern Showdown Series, for those who don't know, is a 8-person 3-deck round robin format. It's a broadcast tournament hosted by the Princes of Premodern, Michael Hoyp, and Flint Espel. Matches are on Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern. Players pick 3 decks. The format used to be 3 decks with bans, and then you pick from the remaining 2. Now the format is a rotation. So you have 3 decks. In a set of 3 matches, you have to play each deck once. So on week 1, you'll choose from one of 3 decks. I like that
a lot less. I love the ban format. That's why I picked the decks I did. I mean, granted, I didn't do very well last year, but I love the ban format.
Yeah, there's two things about the ban format. The first is that effectively, you'll see certain decks like not ever like just get repeatedly banned. It'd just be like, okay, I know I don't want to play against player X's.
My Replenisher got banned 6 times.
Exactly. So that was kind of like not fun for the viewers because if you're like, hey, I want to see Michael J play his Replenish deck, this is going to be awesome. And then Replenish gets repeatedly banned, the viewers get robbed of experience.
I played it first week against Tom Metelsky, and he defeated me.
Yeah, but then the rest of your opponents were too scared to leave it open. The second thing is actually going to go into story time. So I don't actually even know if this is like I'm pretty sure this is tame within the PSS rules, but like Tom Metelsky sends me a message sometime in mid-June, and he's just like, "Hey Lanny, what are 3 really good decks?" And I'm just like, I don't know, Dreadnought, Landstill, like I just like named 3 decks that I think are really good. And he's like, interesting. And then I was like, Tom, I've kind of thought about this. I think if I had to pick 3 really good decks, I would pick 3 decks that have the same weakness. And then if I was playing them in a 3-deck ban format, I would ban the deck that all 3 of my decks are weak to. And then I would like mop off the competition.
Pause. when Lanny says he's thought about this, the number of times per week we game through PSS deck decisions is greater or less than 2. like, like listeners at home, how often do you think we talk about PSS deck selection when the Spike Colony podcast is not actually recording? It's more than once a week.
Yeah, we love.
I know what
PSS.
I would have picked this year. I would have picked the opposite of Lanny's paradigm, which is not a bad paradigm, but it's just you shouldn't just pick 3 good decks, right? I think that's the mistake people make. You should pick like maybe Parfait, 12-12, and Fluctuator, for example, which are 3 decks that can't lose to the red deck, which is the opposite of Lanny saying. Wait, is that the same as what you're saying? No,
No.
Right?
It's a little bit different. It's the opposite. So in a band format, we'll go into the differences in the format. So in a band format, let's say you have 3 decks. So for instance, my Grotog deck, the Rock, and Elves. None of these 3 decks can beat Burn, but in a band format, you'll never play against Burn until you get to the top 4, right? So those are 3 really strong decks. They have basically just one weakness. If you always ban the weakness, then you cover your decks really well. And then no matter what your opponent bans, you'll kind of have like a pick that's good. So anyways, the format changed. And in the linear narrative, I actually wasn't selected for the PSS initially. You might remember that Francisco, friend of the podcast, was selected and announced for the PSS on stream during the Midwest Premodern Championships. Due to some circumstances, he couldn't play it. And so they told me I was first in line for 2024. And so I was first off the wait list for 2023.
They gave you the team pass down?
Yeah, basically I got my invite passed down.
So I was actually mad when Lanny got announced because like I had been like, so Fran had told me he had made it, right? And so I was just like, I was mad because I was like, I thought I was going to have my redemption arc. The princes were like, oh, no. People watch when you're on. We're going to give you the chance for the redemption arc. And then I didn't get picked. So I was just like so mad. And then Lanny's like, oh, yeah, I didn't get picked either. And then like a week later, Lanny gets picked. And I'm just like, you just lied to me. Like, this is the worst.
I was not lying at the time.
He didn't say anything to me.
I was not lying at the time.
He just never mentioned a word.
Yeah, because he couldn't leak. I mean, TBH, I'm not feeling great about leaking. Maybe I have to edit out the whole thing about Tom leaking. What do you think about that?
He just asked you a question. And by the way, we talk about how we would structure our PSS decks all the time. That's like a thing that we talk about. Like, obviously, because in our imaginations and our hallucinations, we're going to get asked back in some of our cases, or asked for the first time in other of our cases.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe if I'd made 3rd again, I would ask back.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, they didn't wait to select the players for LobsterCon to select the players. So you have to imagine that maybe Selden would have gotten an invite, et cetera, et cetera. Schedule. I mean, we don't know who they asked in their system. But anyways, at the end of the day, I get in. So the format this year is a rotation. It's A, B, and C. So my thoughts going into the rotation is that you still can sort of matchup dodge in that if you, for instance, had the lineup that I described. You don't want to line up with the same weakness.
You can't. Like if your opponent has red deck, for sake of argument.
I'll get into that. I misspoke. I'm saying if you have decks A, B, and C, they can no longer share a weakness. So for example, in this year's PSS, some people have 3-deck lineups that cannot beat Fluctuator. And Will Hurst is the only person who was smart enough to pick Fluctuate. So
I told you I would have picked Fluctuator as one of my decks.
I would have picked Fluctuator too, but I wanted to. I have my theme going, and I feel I also want to put on a good show. I want to showcase some Lanny Huang originals. So that's how it goes when you have some hubris.
Let's do this. Why don't we go through the deck lists? When we get to Lanny Huang, I will treat Lanny Huang as though he was the same as any of the other yahoos whose decks I'm just reading out loud like this was certain other podcasts. And then I will give my opinion on this Lanny Huang, who some buffoon has once declared to be the greatest deck designer in the world. maybe he's the second best, but
Yeah, it
he's
sounds
playing
like-
the first.
Sounds like
best
I'm
deck
falling.
designer's decks.
I'm probably falling pretty far down the list after my.
I mean, you're the first best deck designer did not do you any favors at Misty. I'll tell you that.
Fair
no
enough.
favors for you.
Fair enough. All right. So I'm going to start looking at my spreadsheet. So Mike, you'll just have to follow along by clicking around. We'll just name the decks. And if there's anything of interest, I'll go ahead and go into them. So Rich Shea has Goblins, Parfait, and Blue-White Knot. The Goblins list of note does not leverage Ancient Tomb. It has 4 ports, but it's running 3 City of Brass to smooth out the green count. There's 2 naturalized main. The rest is pretty stock. Maybe the 1 Tinkerer main is worth mentioning. Sideboard, also pretty stock. Has access to 2 Tranquil Domain out of the sideboard. Parfait is classic Parfait, basically carbon copy of what he played at LobsterCon, if I'm not missing anything. Maybe he trimmed a Pyroclasm. That's pretty dependable. And then the Blue-White Stifle Knot list. The main deck is a 1-for-1 copy of the deck I gave Itai, with the exception of an additional Swords to Plowshares in exchange for 1 foil. The sideboard is up to 2 Brain Freezes, and then the rest of it is pretty stock. Notably, he's got 2 Last Breath. What do we think about Blue-White Knot, Parfait, and Goblins?
All right, so I would have played probably Parfait, Blue-White Knot, and maybe I wouldn't have played Parfait because I just don't enjoy it, but I would have definitely played Blue-White Knot as one of my decks. It's good against red deck. It is absurd at free wins, right? So big fan of that. I'm surprised that Rich played Goblins. Goblins is Goblins is the Rock. Let's be honest, right? Like, it's a deck that it's better than the Rock, but it's the Rock. It's a deck you just come in. It's in the middle of the road. It can beat everybody. It can lose to everybody. It depends on a lot of things, which is fine. He's not the only person who played Goblins this time around. And then Rich Shade not playing Parfait is. If there was one deck I would have picked, of course I would have picked that. I'm actually surprised he didn't play Blue-White. Rich loves Tide Control. It's his favorite archetype in Premodern, actually. He played it last year, obviously.
Yeah. I think he made the evaluation that Tide Control is not great right now. It doesn't really do anything to anyone. It was like a real mid-range control killer, but we're not really living in a mid-range world right now, so that cuts out of it its equity. He also might have had the read on other players. He also... this is something that I think is a pretty good strategy for this format. You have to keep your opponents guessing. So if your decks really do need to have 3 different play styles, because once
over a 3-week span, if you're like match 6 or match 3 or whatever, don't you know what the opponent is going to be playing 100% of the time?
Right, but your opponent knows what you're going to be playing.
Oh,
as well.
then they're also locked in?
Yep.
Okay.
Both players are locked in. So it's important to know, it's like, okay, so if you have 3 decks remaining, and one of them is still Goblins, right? What are you gonna pick against Rich Shea with your 3 decks against the possibility of getting Goblins, Blue-White Knot, or Parfait? I
would have played like maybe not Parfait, maybe Landstill, or I can say because I beat red decks with Landstill, but I would have definitely played 12-12. We'll call it some kind of control deck, probably maybe Star Spangled Slaughter. Honestly, that's a Meddling Mage deck, and which I think I can play competently. And I would have played Fluctuator as my 3rd deck. I think if I were playing Fluctuator, I'd have a huge advantage against the Goblins deck, and I could beat with Parfait.
Depending. I mean, Rich doesn't have the Meddling Mage sideboard, which is definitely huge for Fluctuator. Yeah. We tested Parfait versus Fluctuator, and I cannot lose that matchup because whatever you mulligan to, I mulligan to better because I get a mulligan to Duress, Enlighten, Tutor for Crypt on game 1, and then on game 2, I get to mulligan to Meddling Mage.
Yeah, so notably last year in the Star Spangled Slaughter, aka this girl matchup against Fluctuator, BK against
couldn't find Meddling Mage.
He mulliganed to nil and just lost the Fluctuator.
But he didn't have tutor. He didn't have game 1. That's like the biggest difference, was that he couldn't lock up game 1. Well, anyways, I mean, I guess you need 2 out of 3 times you need to have Meddling Mage. And then game 1...
I'm just saying I would play Fluctuator.
Yeah. Fluctuator is super good, and we'll get into the reason why later when we look at some of these lineups that basically Hurst, if he doesn't cash in an absolutely free cakewalk win with Fluctuator, then, that's on him.
So last year, I thought Rich Shea had whiz bang the best. I thought the best deck setups last year were number 1 Shea, number 2 caffeinated 22, number 3 Metelsky.
Caffeinated is, of course, Aaron Diggs, for the listeners who
and
don't
so
know his online names.
I don't think that Rich has the best setup this year. Last year, whiz bang, no question, Rich had the best setup last year. This year, I don't think so. I think Goblins is just like notably too middle of the road for a player of Rich Shea's ability, especially if he has to play it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hot take.
Not leveraging his abilities.
I mean, I think that it's interesting. Like, the Goblins deck is really hard to evaluate because it is one of those decks that it does feel like, oh, if your opponent wants to beat it, they can. And it does feel like, oh, you don't like draw Lackey and then you're not quite good. But honestly, I think I think
that's an overrated hot take. I mean, it's just people say these things all the time. I almost won a PTQ once where I read my opponent for having a second turn Oko, and I kept a hand that didn't have Oko, and I was just like, I think he has a second turn Oko. He's on the play. I'm not going to keep. I know my hand can't produce a fast Oko, but I have Mystical Dispute. I just disputed his Oko on turn 2, and then he just faded, and I dragged him.
Yeah, right? I mean,
like,
I think it's possible.
I feel like just like the whole Lackey thing is the same thing. Where it's you have to have these explosive hands.
Let's put it this way. I think Goblins, like the Rock, is a pretty reliable deck in that it is quite favored, like just for being like a good deck. Like, you know, for instance, Goblins is one of the only decks that can probably pull a positive win rate against Blue White Knot. We've tested this extensively, and as long as the Goblins player sort of knows what they're doing, they should be able to come out on top of that matchup winning.
I think there is a joy in Premodern that doesn't exist in other formats, right? So on Thursday, I didn't actually get to watch the first week of PSS because I was playing at our meetup, right? And I played against David Tao in round 4, and David conceded to me in game 3 because allegedly he had to leave. So the battlefield position was David had a permanent, which was a survival of the fittest, and no other permanents. So he had no lands, no Birds of Paradise at the point that he conceded. And my position was like 5-7 lands, something like that, and like a handful of cards. And I asked him, do you think you're going to win this game? And he's just like, I think I'm going to win this game, but I'm going to concede and leave anyway. And I couldn't argue with him. Like, he has literally no lands and no Birds of Paradise. Could he come back? Like, I had a lot of wind in my hand, you know? Like, I had used all my...
Tao's playing Hermit Feb, yeah?
Yeah. I'd used all but one of my seals at that point. At one point, I had to seal my own standstill so that I could remove an Auramancer that had put me to 2 life, right? Without triggering my own standstill. So that had put me behind on standstills, and he just got value as a result of multiple exchanges. So he literally could have come back from being Dust Bowled and Plowed to no permanents other than a survival of the fittest. And I bring this up, you know, I went a disappointing 3-1 in that meetup because Smits had gotten you with a series of body blows when you were playing for top 8 of the North American Premodern Championship that Brian Manalaco said he would have conceded the game on 3 different points, and you kept playing and you ended up winning the deciding game. So I feel like Goblins is this interesting deck in that if you have the explosive draws with Lackey into an unbelievable offense, then you can put out an insane offense, right? You're just swinging with, Goblin Pile Drivers that have 1 million power, etc.
Well,
then you have these other games where they're just like the removal deck, right? They're like, okay, I am now the Pyroblast, Pyrokinesis, Tranquil Domain, Hull Breach Naturalized deck. And they're really, the clock is not that robust. Like, they could get you the first turn Lackey, and the Lackey's deploying, like, you know, a Skirk Prospector, and cross your fingers that clock is going to be good enough because you have so much removal. Yeah,
in my game against Smits, he had all the removal, but just Lackey Mog Fanatic to start. So that set me up quite well. You're
just able to recover, even though he got you so good and so many times, right? His first Tranquil Domain got 3 cards, right?
No, 2 cards. It got 3 cards because it gets an Enlightened Tutor.
He said Enlightened Tutor.
Yeah. Tutor for tax and Oath. But luckily my hand was like all gas. I had multiple like Tutor Oath lane tax situations. So as long as I get an Oath on the table, then Smiths can't develop. And Oath is
he removed so much damage from his deck, right? Like, he drew Tormod's Crypt, Hull Breach, Naturalized, Tranquil Domain, and just not that much power, right? And so that's why I think that it's the Rock in that it can both win and lose every kind of matchup. But I think more importantly, if it's going to be the Rock, and so far that it's kind of an interactive removal deck, which I think is a big part of Goblin's overall game plan, especially in sideboarding games, it just leaves the door so wide open that they like. You have this insurmountable, just like I had this advantage against David, where I'm like, he has no permanence other than the survival of the fittest. He's like, I think I would have won if we had played this through.
Yeah.
And maybe he would have, you know? So, and I can't disagree with him. So we're probably going to play test tomorrow and see.
Yeah.
We're Goblins going to be like, let's just jam this matchup and see what happens.
Goblins is like, you know, it's a fair deck. I mean, just like, let's just put it that way. It's probably one of the best fair decks, but it's kind of a fair deck.
I mean, like, in the games that you're losing to Goblins quickly, it's the same like the games that you're losing to Red deck quickly. They don't feel fair.
Yeah.
Like, if the Red deck is just like,
well, Lacky's
Jackal Pup, triple Jackal Pup, like guys, you know, Burn Spell, Ball Lightning, Fire Blast. It doesn't feel fair. The game is over inside of 4 turns.
No. I mean, Burn is an unfair deck.
If Burn is an unfair deck, man, I don't know what decks are fair in pre-modern.
It's literally just the Rock. Deck? Well, let's talk about fair decks when we get to Mike Arnold's lineup. But he's going for the triple fair.
About Mike Arnold's lineup.
I'm going to go down the line here, but anyways, we're spending too much time on Rich. I think Rich's lineup is very strong. I think if you ask somebody what the 3 most powerful decks in pre-modern are, people would say Parfait, Dreadnought, and Goblins. So Rich went ahead and picked Parfait, Dreadnought, and Goblins. I think that's like his calculus was examining the format, just being like, these are the best decks. Like the metagame already tests these decks over and over and over again, right? And at the top is still Parfait, Dreadnought, and Goblins. So we know that these decks can't actually be exploited because they continue to put up top results and the metagame like doesn't handle them.
Interesting.
So
I have a lot of disagreement with your statement. I also think land still has to be considered one of the top decks.
I agree, but I think that
it performs at a high rate and it won the biggest tournament.
It is. Don't get me wrong. Like I think it's in the mix, but I think introducing land still into the lineup like might just I think it's more robust to have Goblins, even if you consider land still a better deck, which I wouldn't necessarily. You know, and then you know, who knows what the motivations are. I think Rich, if I had to rate on a 0 to 5 stars, I would say that Rich gets 4 stars out of 5. He like I think
Rich is the favorite to repeat.
Let's see. Yes, because you didn't see this, but on week 1, just looking at deck lists, Rich clocked that against Replenish, he doesn't need to do anything except for counter, you know, between like 8 and 12 spells being Replenish, Parallax, Replenish, Opalescence.
Replenish, Opalescence.
Replenish, Opalescence, and maybe sometimes Tide. And so in game 1, when going to hand size, Rich elected to Vision Charm his opponent to essentially try to lower the amount of spells that he would need to counter, right? Because if he hits any of those 12 spells, then no. Holy shit.
What happened?
All right, this is breaking news. Land tax is banned in pre-modern.
Well, let's so we could talk about that with Sam when we talk about it later.
Should we? What the?
Are they going to make Rich reroll his deck?
I think we should reroll. Honestly, we can't reroll though because
we can't reroll the PSS.
We can't reroll.
So that's hilarious. But I don't want to talk about that right now. I want to talk about the PSS decks. Let's pretend that wasn't breaking news. Because you and I are just gonna yell at each other for an hour about this thing that we've been yelling at each other in private about.
No. It doesn't matter. Once it's banned, it doesn't matter. I don't have nothing left to yell about. Like,
I mean, it's obvious it should have been banned.
It just happened.
So okay, let's just we're gonna pretend this didn't happen, and we can talk about it in the Sam podcast we're gonna record later. Let's move on from Rich Shea. You think he's the favorite to win? I don't believe him to be favorite to win. Who did he play against first?
No. I think he's one of the favorites. I'm getting into my explanation. My explanation is that Rich Shea is very clear, very clear to me. The by far and away the best Magic player in the PSS. Like, just order of magnitude. Okay. Yeah. Like, it just doesn't, like, we know that Premodern is a format that rewards skill, right? Like, Rich is, and like, sorry to the rest of y'all, but like, and myself, but like, Rich is just like the brain freeze, the counter mill control line. Alvaro was on commentary and was just like yelling. He was like, "Why isn't Rich committing a dread? Like, why isn't he playing a dreadnought?" And like, Rich just put on a master class.
Rich was like 14 levels better than him.
Yeah,
right.
It's like just understanding roles.
Like, when I won, when I made top 8 of the Modern Championships a few years ago, people were watching. They're like, "I don't understand how you play your burn deck," and I'm like, "I know."
Yeah.
Like, you also notice I don't lose any games.
Right. But but that's exactly the point. It's just like this is like a level, like, you know, when somebody's like, I mean, I gush about this all the time. Like, sometimes people are just better, like watching somebody who's better at Magic and like trying to understand, like, this is the stuff. And like, Rich just, I know, like, I'm I play the most games of Premodern, like, whatever. I've played my Replenish deck against Dreadnought. I haven't played against so much Blue-White Dreadnought, which has a little bit of a different angle, thanks to Meddling Mage.
That is weird, because that is the number 1 deck on our team.
Right,
so
but...
it's very weird to hear you say that.
I actually, yeah, well, it just didn't line up. When we were high on Blue-White Knot, we weren't high on Replenish, and when we were high on Replenish, you didn't have Blue-White Knot in the bag. So I owned the Blue-White Knot deck, you refused to play it, and then I was playing the Replenish deck, but I had no... Both you and Tom would refuse to test Blue-White.
About testing, I just sound like a baby. You're just like, Mike just wants to test his pet decks.
Yeah.
He won't play the good decks. Like,
yeah.
I'm a baby.
Sorry.
How
someone's got to take it down.
You think Rich is like 50% better, 10%
than you?
Yeah.
I don't want to hurt your feelings. I'm sorry.
No. I'm honestly asking, like 50% better, 10% better, 30% better.
I mean, okay, I'll qualify this. I actually don't watch you play like for keeps. Like, I only play with you in testing and like whatever. So I don't know if you unlock like some level of ascension, like when the hot seat's on. Like, I mean, literally, you played against David.
The first time we played, I played against David in a fun tournament.
Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. We played in a PTQ. Like, you didn't make any mistakes, but, you know, also like contemporary Magic, right? It's just like, it's pretty easy.
That was an invite-only tournament, right? Like,
that
was like every single person who had played in that tournament had won a tournament.
Right,
that's an important distinction.
No, that's not an important distinction. For the record, everybody who was in that tournament, there were 32 players. They just had to top 8 one of 4 invitational tournaments.
Top 4.
No, top 8. That had 4 invitational tournaments that had up to 12 players. So do you know how I qualified? I qualified by going 2-0 and then triple ID for the invite.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I actually won mine. So,
I
assumed everyone took a hard
For the listeners, in 2019, the PTQ system got opened up so that stores could run PTQs. Our store ran a PTQ feed system, so you played 8. Like, they hosted 4 tournaments that invited 8 players to a 32-person PTQ. But the thing is, attendance was so low. You would literally have weeks where 9 people showed up for the 8 invite tournament.
I wasn't aware of that. So the reason I ask you is because I think I'm pretty good, right? I think I'm certainly better than the average player, but I would concede Rich is better than I am. But I also think you're better than I am. So like that's the you know, you have a more sophisticated thought process than I do.
That's true. I mean, that's true. But I think I have like I think I still like we talk about in-game decisions a lot, and then we kind of draw different conclusions. Rich is somebody who is making in-game decisions that are aligned with like that are aligned with understanding matchups as they play out. So for example, last night I played, or 2 nights ago I played against Will Hurst on Stasis, and I had the read in game 2 that we like both players like in game 2 were like, wait a second, Will should be playing Brain Freeze. So first of all, Will, good player, but he didn't have the read that he should play Brain Freeze for game 2. So he was already like, this is something that I think more analytical, stronger players would understand to sideboard in Brain Freeze, you know, like as an improvised strategy, right? Because nobody, like, not too much testing has gone into specifically Brain Freeze Stasis versus Grotog, right? So you have to make decisions as matches unfold, in addition to preparing for your match. So my preparation for Will was like, I think this game is all about Meddling Mage Psychotog, but I didn't think, oh, I can never play a game that goes to like turn 8 where both players have 8 lands and that Will has more volume. So I made a mistaken analysis because even though I had a good plan, I didn't understand how important it was to execute that plan in a shorter timeline. And then secondly, I had the read that that Will was going to board in Brain Freeze for game 3 because obviously he pulled out a sideboard and we both saw that we did like an 8 spell stack or whatever. And I didn't adjust to that read, so I didn't adjust to make my deck more aggressive, knowing that Hearst was going to go for Brain Freeze instead of Vice. So Rich...
That's interesting. It takes a lot of commitment to take Black Vice out of your deck.
Exactly. It's crazy. So
unless you're a buffoon, you just don't have it in your deck.
Yeah. So Rich, in the midst of, like, while the game is playing out, like beforehand and while the game is playing out, right? Rich basically just kind of understands that he needs to like vision charm his opponent. And I think the amount of analysis and understanding of like what's happening in front of you, like the problem with most Magic players, right, is they're pretty rigid. Like they play a land every turn, they cast the spells that are in their hand, like they don't adapt to what's like happening in the game. And the end result of that is that you don't end up making plays like, well, I've got all these vision charms in my hand. They're good at protecting dreadnoughts, but they're even more valuable at milling opalescence and replenish. And so Rich sees the line, he takes the line, and he gets rewarded for it. And then into game 2, he boards in Brain Freeze. I think he boards in like some amount of dreadnought, or boards out some. I mean, I don't know exactly what he boarded out, but ultimately, like, this is just like something that I never really would have thought of. I'm the replenish seat normally, so for what it's worth, like I have a different approach to the matchup from the replenish seat. Like Jared played early City of Traders, I wouldn't have done that, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, Rich is just a great player. I think the only thing that Rich lacks maybe is potentially some point percentage on the deck advantage side. Because I do think that Rich makes a lot of choices with that I see in his parfait list that are kind of motivated by a sort of like pet card thing or like having like the perfect Enlightened Tutor piece and that kind of stuff. So
there's 2 investment strategies you can take, right? So I think about Magic deck selection as like very kind of capitalist market analogous. Like this is the way that I look at things, just like, you know, how many points can I get against the market is really the way that it works. And if you're young, right, the conventional wisdom is you can take a lot of risks because you have a lot of time for the market to bounce back, and you know, you just win by compound interest. Like you have more years to put into savings accounts, right? That's really, or like into brokerage accounts, because you're young. If you're old, your objective is not to grow, your objective is to guard your wealth, right? So typically you're more aggressive when you're young, and then typically you make not maximized decisions when you're old, because all you want to do is to not run out of money before you die once you're old, right? Whereas when you're young, you want to build the biggest pile of gold to lay on, you know, that you can slowly consume after you retire. That's kind of the 2 paradigms. If you're the best technical player in the PSS, you don't have to make
to take risks.
The young player, right? You could just retain your leads. And I actually think that if you really think that the 3 best conventional decks in Premodern are Parche, Blue White Dreadnought, and
well, Parche actually isn't a Premodern deck anymore, so
okay. Snark aside, right? This happened during the podcast recording. If you think those are the 3 best decks in Premodern, then the grumpy old dragon lying on his pile of gold is perfectly well positioned to just retain his leads. He doesn't have to stretch. That's not how I've ever approached Magic, because I don't necessarily have ever thought that I was the best player at the table. I just thought that I had the best ability to conceptualize what everybody was doing around me. And so those are very different skills. And I actually, if you're going to say something like that, I would actually agree. Maybe those are the 3 best decks for Rich to pick. And I will vote right now. If the princes are listening, I don't think you should re-roll the PSS. But we have spent an hour talking about only 1 of 8 players. We should probably move on.
40 minutes, yeah. Rich is my pick. I totally agree. This is just a great school of thought. Like, if you're a strong player, don't, shore, like you said, shore shore up your leaks. Don't try to take big swings. Rich is clearly adopting that strategy. Next
You don't have to. Oh yeah. So like there's a great Mike Flores article called not How to Think About Magic. It's I think not. It's the same year that Patrick did Information Cascades. It's about how to win tournaments though. Like and like a big part of it is just play hard enough to get a lead and keep the lead, right? And I think that one of the problems people have is like once they've gotten the lead, they keep taking big swings, and that's a good way to give up too many resources. Yeah. So let's talk about anybody else.
All right. Jared Doucette, Goblins, once again, a pretty conservative Goblin list, just Wastelands instead of ports, more
Jared
green
Doucette,
sources.
The
organizer of
patron saint of Premodern. Yeah, I think we can give Jared the title of patron saint.
Yeah, let's put him in the feudal system. So I would say that Jared Doucette is the Earl of Premodern.
The Earl of Premodern. Why isn't he not the Emperor of Premodern? If you're like the sole human being who decides if there's LobsterCon or not, I think you might rank above the princes who are coming to your event.
Well, the
beyond.
So the thing is, the Emperor or the King does not do any work. So Jared puts in a lot of actual work.
Oh, I see.
So
maybe he's like the look, who's he's like the chief of staff of the White House.
Yeah, exactly.
He actually has the most power. The chief of staff is much more powerful than, let's say, the vice president, right? But he puts in DI work, right? He's like the one who's scheduling all the president's meetings, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll call him the chief of staff of Premodern.
Yeah,
which is a great compliment.
Yeah. So we've got Wastelands over ports. We have green sources in the form of Mossfire Valley, City of Brass. Res is pretty stock. Once again, we have a Tinker in the main. We have a Sharpshooter main. We have an extra Tormod's Crypt. Same thing, Blast, Naturalize, etc. We also have Replenish. This is
notably Heroes played against Jared Doucette playing his Red Green Goblins deck at LobsterCon, and Jared flipped over 4 cards on Goblin Ringleader like at least 2 times in a row.
Yeah, 2 times in consecutive turns, and then he proceeded to lose that game and that match. He also has Replenish. This is sort of what's become the stock Replenish build. Basically innovated between Fluffy, Manos. I think Anton's been playing it. Super solid list. It opts, instead of the Squee package, a la Mike Flores, it's opting for 4 Swords to Plowshares, 4 Seal of Cleansing main. Basically all 4 of 24 lands, 16 4-mana spells that go and replenish, 1 Chain of Vapor over 1 Intuition. Jared doesn't own a fourth $150 Intuition.
Neither do you.
Neither. I own 0. Jared's sideboard, 4 Orm's Chant, Mana Short, Chill, Blast, 2 Factor Fiction, 1 Powder Kick, 1 Null Rod, and then we have the Rock. This is...
I do enjoy that there is some Flores DNA in this deck, I gotta say.
Yeah. I mean, you definitely made the Replenish deck like all about the Parallax and kind of picked up and like whatever, but I do think...
just like the Fox in the sideboard and like Mana Shortish stuff. I don't like this list, just FYI.
Yeah.
I think it's
we'll get into it. Jared also has the Rock. This is almost Carbon Lanny Rock. We've got this is Lanny Rock.
This is the deck I played in LobsterCon Day 2, except it has the Volrath Stronghold instead of the Dust Bowl.
No, it's got Volraths and Dust Bowl.
And Dust Bowl.
It has 1 City of Brass. No, he added a City of Brass to basically cheat in the extra. No, I see.
I'm looking at deck pictures, so I don't necessarily see those small.
We'll call this stock Lanny Rock or stock Lanny Rock with Fran's innovations, which then he handed to Mike, which then Jared decided he added a City of Brass to. I mean,
Jared is probably scarred after that match. To be fair, like he quad goblins me 2 turns in a row, and the dealer had me though. Can't argue with the dealer.
Yeah. So we've got that going on. Jared's lineup. I hope this isn't unfair to Jared, but I do think that these are basically the decks that he plays. I know he's actually new to Replenish. He's playing it for the first time. Like, he just got the last cards he needed, and he's playing it for the first time in the monthly. So I don't know if Jared's really trying to play any chess with this lineup. He's a Rock player, he's a Goblins player, and Replenish is a new deck that he has. I think it's a solid lineup, but he doesn't have any like real haymakers. I think Replenish is a super strong deck, but you do need to line it up against your opponents. And then right now there's a lot of Wasteland running around, and Replenish hates getting Wastelanded. So,
I mean, yeah, especially with all these soul lands, right? So, Replenish kind of cheats on land. Like, if you think, oh, no, it doesn't. He's got 24 land. How's he cheating? Well, he's kind of cheating because even though it's 24 land, which is the same as everybody else, if you like compare that to like a red deck or a Goblins deck with about 24 land, I mean, Jared's entire curve is 4.
Yep.
Right?
Replenish has 4. To play. Replenish needs to play a lot of mana sources to be a dependable deck, and it can afford to play a lot of mana sources because it has access to so much looting. But at the end of the day, I really want this to be like a 28 land deck.
Not really. This deck doesn't have Careful Study.
Yeah. His list only has Frantic Search and
this is a way slower deck to get off the ground. I would hate to be in a position where I was forced to play a City of Traders early. Right? Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes, but I would not like to be in that position if I could help it. So I'm gonna say I'm not in love with these choices. It's like I think Replenish is a super powerful strategy, but I'm not in love with this list in particular. Yeah. I think like removing the Squee, Careful Study, what do you call it? A solitary confinement lock. I would have liked it more if you were to do that in last year's format. If I'm forced to play this deck, and I might be forced to play it out of position, why would I not want to have my auto win? Right? Like, not having my auto win is just, that's hard to me. Also, in addition, you get to keep more hands if you have like the kind of the squee package. With
I agree with all that. This is just kind of like a Mike's world versus the rest of the world. Like, this list is basically gaining a lot of steam because a couple pilots have been sort of teching it out, and they basically concluded that they wanted early interaction. I actually received a little bit of coaching from Sam Black. I paid for an hour of coaching from Sam Black because I wanted to play Replenish in LobsterCon. I was feeling really good about it up until I lost a few matches that put me off it. But basically, Sam's feedback was like, Replenish has to do something about playing cards like that cost 1 or 2 mana. Because like the core package is 16 4-mana spells. And then the add-ons are Attunement and Intuition and basically Frantic Search, right? Because you can't really play that until turn 3. So then your next 12 cards cost 3 mana. It's like you need something to do, and Careful Study is a good card, but it doesn't affect the board. And the Squee package is another 4 cards that you can't cast. So the idea here is to play a deck that is absolutely slower, but has a little bit more things to do in the early game. Whether those things matter, like, do you need to plow something if you're going to win on turn 3 or 4? Like, maybe not. But at the end of the day, this is just the predominant Replenish list, and Jared is new to the deck, so he's not going to be trying to shake it up too much.
I want to say the major thing I dislike about this deck is the Hydroblast in the sideboard and the second mana short. And the reason that I say that is you actually need the card Counterspell. Right? So I even argued with David Tao, and you and he made top 8 of the Game Storia tournament last year, and he's like, "Oh, I just paid Mana Leak. It seems like it makes sense." Like, you actually need to have actual Counterspell, and it's not negotiable. So anybody listening to this, I would like you to listen to me. It is not negotiable. You need to have the ability to hard counter your opponent. I was typically siding in Counterspell against Jackal Pup decks. You will lose the game if certain things happen to you. So, for example, I would always joke I could beat a rock deck who, like, Duress and Cabal Therapied me all that they wanted just because I had Thawing Glaciers, right? So they're going to get a small amount of disruption advantage, and then I'm going to respond by getting a bunch of card advantage between Factor Fiction and Thawing Glaciers. The problem is if you can't unconditionally say no with the card Counterspell, you straight up lose to Haunting Echoes. You straight up lose to any number of cards. Your deck cannot win without the card Opalescence in play. There are a lot of things that can go wrong for you, and you can still win. But every single way that the Replenish deck wins requires the card Opalescence in play, which means that if you have Opalescence in your graveyard, you can't get Haunting Echoes. if you have opalescence in play, you need to be able to protect it with Parallax Wave, right? Like, otherwise you can't win. In fact, you'll probably deck because your deck draws so many extra cards. So that's actually my big problem. I mean, like, there's like a bunch of minor stuff, right? Like, I think Null Rod is unplayable in this strategy. I've written about that, right? Like, it's just bad. If your opponent is going to be able to interact with your enchantments in game 1, they can interact with an artifact on turn 2, which means that you just put it to a situation where it's just your deck against their deck again. They probably have more sideboard stuff than 2 Null Rods.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to like deep dive Replenish a bit because I've put a lot of thought and work into this deck. I think you're making a lot of salient points. But yeah, it's like it's a very interesting deck to try to like understand what your opponents are doing against you and whatnot. I think that I personally am not running Counterspell, but the way my sideboard behaves is a lot different.
Yeah, but your deck is also a turn faster than everybody else's. I actually want to talk about that. It's quite different.
Yeah. No, it behaves way different.
This is like a very like conventional-ish Replenish deck. Just taking out the Careful Study, Squee, Solitary Confinement package that I played. It obviously doesn't have a lot of the spice, like the Thawing Glaciers, etc. in the sideboard, but I really feel strongly about the card Counterspell. And the problem that people, I think, don't understand who haven't played it enough is, while Replenish can get a large advantage in the first 4 turns, it can't really win in the first 4 turns, the way that it's currently built, which means that you have to keep playing, right? Like, sometimes you have to like.
Well, you don't keep playing if you have all 3.
Yeah, but that's really hard to do in the first 3 to 4 turns of the game. What's much more common is you just cast 2 forecasting cost spells, and then you hope that you can beat somebody with a Parallax Wave and an Opalescence in play. Right, that's your whole game. That's very good, by the way. Right, you put your opponent on a 4 to 5 turn clock. It's really hard for them to damage you with creatures, but stuff can still go wrong. Right, yeah. So that's the problem. You still have to play the next 4 to 5 turns of the game if that's your game plan. But given the fact that that's your game plan, you don't have mana disruption implied there. You don't have the ability to say no on an unconditional basis. You could just straight up lose to a removal card and a disruption card.
Yeah,
and then you can't come back.
Well, yeah,
like,
I mean,
your deck needs Opalescence in play.
Right. I mean, it's pretty. I mean, it's like robust. You kind of have to like line up because like one Disenchant's like not really great against you. Like it's useful, but it's not great. A Null is quite good against you.
I'd rather
it's really
play
hard
Null than Disenchant, but
I mean, it's complicated. Again, like
it's complicated.
Yes. Yeah, the way your opponent interacts with you has a lot to do with their deck. I mean, that's actually basically what it comes down to because there's just a lot you can do, a lot of different angles of attack. So like let's talk about Replenish in the context of this PSS. Its main opponents are going to be Goblins, the Rock, and Stiflenot variants, right?
Well,
and so
first off, Goblin is one of the hardest matchups for Replenish. It's incredibly difficult to win that matchup.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I don't actually think there's much Replenish can do besides Admok Simon to fight against Goblins.
You have to actually win the game. Like the way that you win that matchup is by actually winning the game. And David Town and I have talked about this a lot. Like, I don't think you don't have the liberty to take out Tide, I think, because you need to like. I think that one of the main things that people do, and I've watched a lot.
The Goblins also have Tranquil Domain, which is a big thing.
Yeah, is that sometimes the Goblins deck will break their Wooded Foothills when they just have a spare Wooded Foothills and put the green in play without having a reason to actually actively do that, right? They're not going to cast Tranquil Domain, Naturalize, or Hull Breach that turn, but they go and get the green anyway because they're like, oh, well, I have 3 red lands, or like I have 2 red lands. I can just, I'm at liberty to use this Wooded Foothills to get the green. That's actually quite bad. And the reason that it's bad is you just gave the Replenish player, without using your green mana for an enchantment disruption play, you gave them the ability to lock out your ability to interact with enchantments for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Like, if the wrong thing happens, they don't have to beat you now. They actually just have to lock out that forest. And you now need to find another source of green. You can have every sideboard card in the world. If you tap out wrong, you actually can't interact with them. And like, you just have this ongoing mind twist where you just draw cards that theoretically should be good cards, but they're uncastable.
Yeah.
Right. So, anyway, I think Goblins is one of the toughest matchups for Replenish. I would not personally have played any version of Replenish. No offense, because I think Goblins is so bad for you, and it's also not very good against like. Yeah, there's just like a lot of matchups like E-Tide beat Replenish like 3 times at 12-12 at LobsterCon. Right. There's just matchups I just want to play.
Well, I have the luxury of not choosing Replenish if I fear my opponent is going to have Blue-White not in their lineup.
So, or land still, right? I think like a.
Oh no,
I
mean,
there's only one land still player, right?
Yeah, and that's Tom Matelski.
Unfortunately, it's one of the best land still players you could play.
I like how the deck performs against Landstill, and we'll get into that once I talk about my list. Jumping over to Jeff White, we have Goblins Replenish again.
Jeff White Weenie, please. Please use his correct name.
Jeff White Weenie. His Goblins list has one Caller of the Claw sideboard. Figured I'd call that out.
Sick.
But yeah, same deal. 4 Wasteland instead of ports, and then a Tinker
main. Hull Breach main deck instead of Naturalize.
Yep. Tinker main deck.
I mean, any of the changes that we're talking about, the Goblins decks, Jeff White Weenie's deck versus Jared's deck versus Rich's deck, any of those changes are not really. I think if anybody, Jeff White Weenie has the strongest baseline changes because he can actually get the king in a situation that he might want it. But he's exchanging that for a 4th Siege Gang commander. Right?
I mean, I like a 4th Siege, or well, actually, no player has 4 Siege Gang because they're not playing Ancient Tomb, and I think Ancient Tomb unlocks the 4th Siege Gang. So that's a big note. This is pretty much the same discussion. Replenish is going to be the same discussion. We have basically Carbon Copy, Jeff going for Deep Analysis, Arcane Denial for the counterspell slot. But
Arcane Denial is at least an
hard counter. Yeah.
Spell.
It's hard counter. It could be awkward. It's a little awkward to have 3, but I don't mind its inclusion. It's really hard for Replenish, of course, to have UU up. And then we have Elves. The only Elves player.
Yeah, man. That's a good man, has an advance.
Yeah, 1 advance chant. I like it.
No, the Rock. I mean, I played against Jeff White Weenie at LobsterCon last year, and he played the Rock.
Oh, sometimes you gotta put the Rock down. Sometimes. We have the only Elves. He's going Turbo Elves. He's got the 3 Spirit Guide to unlock turn 1 Priest of Titania, which is basically the best thing the Elves deck can do.
Double bio.
2 Biorhythm main. Also very bold. It's definitely hedging against some control here. And then, stock sideboard for Naturalized 3 Tormod's Crypt, 2 Null Rods, which I think is interesting because Null Rod really only fights Parfait. I would rather have removal for Oath against Parfait rather than trying to attack Scroll Rack Mox Diamond. But Null Rod has splash damage, at least against Alvaro's blue-red Tinker deck. Jeff, I don't know too much about his background as a player. I think that
he has an old school deck named after him, which is Jeff White Weenie. And he's a sped, so Mano introduced him to me as his best friend. Maybe they're very good friends. I don't know. He said, this is my best friend. And he has kind of the miscut cards. I thought he was playing the Rock against me, and I thought it was an island, but it was a miscut Arena Swamp. He's like, oh, sorry for that. If that was confusing, I'm like, nice. It doesn't look like a Magic card.
Nice.
But good on you. I appreciate that kind of stuff. I'm not a huge fan of this lineup either. I
think Elves and Goblins in the same lineup is a big liability. Basically because you can't put yourself in a situation where your Replenish deck isn't available if your opponent can punish your Goblins and Elves. So let's take for example.
Elves, I'm not losing to the Rock. If that's
no. That's not what I'm talking about. Parfait, dum. Come on. Parfait.
Elves can beat Parfait.
Elves can beat Parfait.
That's what Parfait lost to last year.
Mike, get with the times. Parfait doesn't lose to Elves anymore. Rich has 2 Pyroclasm sideboard.
Yeah, they banned land tax for a reason. Buddy.
He didn't. Rich went back down to 2 Duress, which I think is a big throw, but Duress is one of the biggest innovations in Parfait. Parfait didn't have Duress.
That's because you made one of the most dramatic plays at LobsterCon, that 0 land, stone Duress your opponent, blow up my own land, pass the turn, he can't win the game in time anymore. That was awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the Void Parfait.
He doesn't have to do that. He's old. Old people with their sitting on a pile of gold don't need to make the big swings.
So the Parfait Cabal added Duress, and Duress is a big reason. And also let's remind the audience that Rich Shea did not have Shard Phoenix when he first made the deck. He had Triskelion, which is a huge difference if you're playing against Elves and Goblins. So
huge upgrade, I think.
Yeah.
For those matchups.
Do you remember the top 8 that Mark Vogt won in the Euro Champs last year? It had 3 elves players. He was feasting on elves all day. So talking about Jeff's
Did he also have main deck Meddling Mage and main deck
No,
Engineered Plague?
No, he had main deck Plague, but no main deck Meddling Mage because it's an Oath deck, Mike.
Oh, yeah, he had main deck. There's only one Engineered Plague in Rich's 75 here.
He should have kept the one main because that's it's so good main, but he might have trimmed it. Yeah, no main deck Plague, just one in the sideboard. Okay, well that's kind of a throw. Anyways.
Oh, yes, second Sylvan Library.
Oh, that's just okay. I don't want to talk about that. Sylvan Library is so bad. Okay,
and he's still on the Zur's Weirding teat.
No, Zur's Weirding definitely is good.
It's an untimed round, buddy. It's just like having to win in a certain time period.
No. Zur's definitely wins in spots where you can
play
lose.
For 3 hours last year.
Zur, you can lose in spots that Zur's helps you win for sure. But anyways, let's talk about this scenario. So Jeff White, week 1, knows he's playing against Rich Shea week 2. So Jeff can't pick Replenish in week 1 because then Rich gets a slam dunk parfait on week 2 against Elves or Goblins. So this is why this lineup has a little bit of a vulnerability because Elves and Goblins share a weakness, which means you can't have them as the only 2 decks remaining against an opponent that can exploit. I would not want to play
this Replenish deck against Parche either. This seems like a rough matchup for
No. Replenish is really good against Parfait.
I was a Replenish player last year, and I had the prospect of playing against Rich Shea playing Parche. I'm not telling you it's. I'm not saying.
No, trust me. Replenish is favored. Like I played it a bunch. It's like just super favored. It's a combo deck that
many things
Parfait
Rich can do.
No, all Rich can do is Aura of Silence or Tormod's Crypt, and you have plans for both. And Parfait is just super slow, so your development gets to like go pretty easy, and you can just like slam them. And the thing is, once you have the combo, you remove all their permanents. Like all they have left is Mox Diamond because they lose their land tax and Oath and stuff.
I've played the deck.
They lose their seal cleansing.
I don't want it.
Their seal cleansing doesn't have they just can't do anything. Trust me, they can't do anything. Like it's really good for Replenish. And Jeff played Elves week 1. He's absolutely saving Replenish against Rich's Goblins or Parfait.
Jeff win? I mean, Elves is the most broken deck.
Nope. Jeff lost to Tom Matelski, played against Blue White Knot, and Tom gave him the business.
Okay, let's go to the next player.
We have Tom Matelski. Tom Matelski's lineup is Blue White Knot, Landstill, and The Rock. Initially, Tom was like, "What's 3 good decks?" And I was like, "Blue White Knot, Blue White Landstill, and Blue White Replenish." I was just like, put those flood strands in for work. So Tom, I think. Like, obviously, because, this has some Lanny consulting and a lot of Lanny DNA, like, I do think that Tom maybe has a 5-star lineup, but I almost can't award 5 stars.
The best lineup. It's the best lineup for a bunch of reasons. I would have played Fluctuator in his Lanny Rock spot.
Yep.
But, like, I mean, I also don't hate Lanny Rock. I mean, like, I make fun of it all the time. I lost Lanny Rock in the meetup this week. To my great ignominy. I think Rock is a good thing to have in your lineup for the format. Mostly because the Rock is like a deck that you can because it's so because it's like unexploitable. You can basically like. It's a safety valve, right? So as long as you have the Rock in your lineup, you're never going to run into like a matchup that you can't win. Whereas if you have a very polarized lineup, sometimes things don't break your way and you might run your polarized deck into a deck that absolutely crushes it. I don't buy that at all. And the biggest issue I have with this, and again, I think Tom has the best lineup in the PSS this year. The reason I don't buy it is I have to play all 3 decks. Like if you're just like, I have a safety valve deck, that's only true if I never have to play the deck unless I'm
no. But I don't disagree with that analysis. But I think like the whole point is that like Tom is very confident in the Rock. He's a good Rock player, and no matter what, like he can basically the worst that he can do, right? If somebody's lineup looks really scary to him, the worst that he can do is play the Rock against that lineup. So you can't do worse.
He was going to give a loss because he had the Rock in his lineup anyway. So
exactly.
No big deal.
Yeah. Well, so the worst you can do is 45%. That's actually not a bad place to be. Whereas, like, if you're playing Fluctuator, like maybe like you get into a position where you have to choose your Fluctuator deck against a Dreadnought deck.
So Tom has 1+1 Dust Bowls in this lineup. No Volrath Stronghold. Interesting. The Stronghold's been doing work for me in testing recently. So
yeah, I mean,
I beat Blue White with it a bunch.
He's teching it out.
I mean, the main deck is literally just like whatever Team Hive mind on this deck at this point, right?
We're kind of the first 58 cards. There's 673 cards.
Main difference is he has a recurring Nightmare Dust Bowl, and then a little bit more artifact enchantment removal instead of 4 Tempting Worms. So among other things, there's not a single like caffeinated 22 burn deck in this PSS this year, which is weird, right? Last year, everybody with me had a red deck. So this is actually brilliant because the Rock's bad matchup is red.
Yeah.
So
it did turn out really
pretty good against goblins, right? So
it's interesting versus goblins. You can still catch a loss, but Tom is good. Quite a good player. Tom's lineup is super good. I think that he's chosen some powerful decks. Honestly, I have to say that I think that you're a bit high on land still, but it's hard to...
No way.
Yeah.
It's the best deck against the best decks. Also, like, they're just lineups that I would never lose a match, I think. Like, I also think it's good against goblins. So, that's the thing. Like, it's good against red decks. It's great against goblins. It's invincible against 12-12 and Parfait. I mean, maybe not invincible against like the Brain Freeze versions, but that's a different universe. I honestly haven't tested against it much.
It can't beat Brain Freeze except for with Arcane Lab.
Selden did. I mean, yeah, but we have Arcane Lab now. So that's the other thing. It's like the Arcane Lab makes the red deck just like a trivial matchup. You can't lose a Fluctuator. Like the fact that you can't lose a Fluctuator because of Arcane Lab is insane.
It's true.
I mean, like if you want to make some criticisms, like Tom and I are playing slightly different land builds at this point. I still have Seals, which I inherited from Tom, but partly I was too lazy to like dig out Disenchants when I made my deck. But I think Seal's still good for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, no,
but I would play a second Arcane Lab, one less Annul, and I'd have. And he's missing the 2 extra Dust Bowls in the sideboard, which is one of the reasons the deck is so robust in so many matchups.
I definitely agree that it's a powerful deck. I think that my analysis of it is that it's a deck that's not particularly good game one, and it's a deck that's not very consistent. So most of your losses are going to be game one.
And I agree, but I'm just going to run through the PSS for a second. Fluctuator, I think Landstill is advantaged. Sly, I guess Hearst has Sly. I like me in the Sly matchup, especially Tom has got an Absorb, which is one of the main things we haggled about. I haven't lost that matchup ever. I know that Hearst beat Selden, but Selden was cheating, right? So it's a little bit worse because Tom isn't playing the Enlightened Tutor package anymore, but I still like that matchup. I think I'm very plus against Fluctuator, plus against Sly. I think I'm a huge favorite against Stasis.
I know that you like your matchups, Mike. But
I can't. I'm talking Ponza deck. That's not going to happen,
Mike. I know that you like you like your matchup spread. What I'm talking about.
I'm talking about the matchup spread of the PSS.
Right, but the matchup spread of the PSS, for better or worse, doesn't have too many differences than like whatever. Because we have like triple gold. Like the only weird thing about our matchup spread is that we have a lot of replenish, and I think that. Landstill is, depending on the replenish list and pilot, actually not that good in that matchup.
I mean, the meddling mage. Sorry, let's assume that you lose game one, which this isn't actually an assumption you can necessarily make because it's not that different, Lanny, than Rich Shea like sitting back. The replenish decks that are not your deck literally just have to play forecasting cost cards in a row.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of natural card advantage. Look, they could just lose to... I don't know how they could beat Forbid. Time to just draw us Forbid. Are you going to 2-spell me ever? Is there a turn you're going to 2-spell me?
No, game one. I'm like sideboard playing rules. Like my sideboard playing is really, really good. I'm not talking about your deck.
I'm talking about the default replenish decks.
Okay, fine. I mean, whatever. Like, you're right about that because people aren't getting creative enough with their replenish deck. So So we'll take that. No, look, Landstill's a good deck. I don't want to belabor this point. I think that the problem with Landstill is more just in its construction, not in like necessarily like whatever, because as we saw in the top 8 of the Midwest Premodern Championships, Dreadnought can also just be Landstill, if Landstill gets a little bit unlucky, or if Dreadnought, like Melee Mage on Sword Supply shares is still very strong against Landstill. But also, the presence of Landstill is a big reason why I have Grotog in my lineup, because my first pre-modern tournament ever, the Game Storia tournament last year, where I took first place, I beat 2 Landstill players, largely because Grotog lines up extremely good against Landstill. So
to be fair, I have no experience in the Grotog matchup, so maybe Lanny Huang has good decks against Landstill, but like, I think
I have Burning Wish for Decree of Annihilation. Arcane Lab, that.
I mean, what if I Hydroblasted your Burning Wish? What if I Counterspelled your Burning Wish?
Oh, I got triple Burning Wish, or I'll just board it in game 2.
Well, long story short, I like Landstill against non-Lanny Huang decks. Maybe I take a loss to Lanny Huang deck. Maybe I save the rock for my Lanny Huang week because
Smart man.
I need to roll the dice. This is almost a fair toss of the coins. Let's go, Lanny Huang's Decree of Annihilation deck.
All right.
But like, I think Tom has the best lineup in the PSS. I would have personally played Fluctuator in place of the Rock, but I cannot argue with his Blue-White Siphonaut deck has no Brain Freeze. Oh. So why does he have a Winter Orb Armageddon split? So here's the thing about Tom. He's using all this team tech, but he's using it halfway. Like, why does he not have like the second Arcane Lab? I'm not a huge fan of Winter Orb plus Armageddon. I think I would rather have, if you're going to go the Armageddon route, I'd rather have Armageddon plus Brain Freeze personally. Can't argue with the rest of his list. Flash of Insight is obviously a Fran special.
I hate the Curse Totems in Tom's list. I don't know if he's got like a bone to pick with elves or something like that, but like I strongly dislike them.
Play it.
They're super narrow, and that's where I would fit in the Brain Freeze. The one Armageddon is, I mean, the team discussion is like we'll just split Geddon and Winter Orb. Both are good. Like both are kind of situational, and then that's like fine. You only need one Armageddon. You just like you only cast it.
Yeah, but Winter Orb is like, I think Selden's argument was that he was winning most of the games his opponent Winter Orbed him, which I think like it's a good point.
No, that's true. Like that's it's an interesting point. I think that the play pattern needs to be adjusted on the side of the blue-white not player. Like again, I mean, this is like, this is just a broader topic, right? I hate to be the guy who's just like, okay, like think about it this way. Let's imagine in all matchups that 2 Rich Shays are playing against each other. Do you think that, the Rich Shay with the Winter Orb is going to beat the Rich Shay with Landstill? I think that's a more interesting conversation. It might be true that Landstill Rich Shay still beats Winter Orb Rich Shay. But the problem is Brian Selden's just being like, well, Winter Orb can't beat me because I beat Winter Orb all the time. It's like, well, you weren't playing against, a person who like had the full understanding of like what was happening in the game that they were playing in addition to the matchup they were playing.
Yeah. So when I was the best deck designer in the world, which is a long time ago, I played 50 hours a week against myself. That was the main way I got there. So I knew every trick from both sides of the table. Yeah. And I could tell you which deck was favored and by how much.
Yeah, that was the joke. My player card said that I woke up at 5 a.m. to test the Parfait matchup, and somebody commented, they're like, well, who's waking up at 5 a.m. to test with Lanny? I'm like, oh, I test against myself.
Yeah, I literally tested against myself, which is the joke. Like when OSIP showed me like is it Signet?
Is it Signet? You're like, Michael J never came up with that.
Like, the reason for that was because I tested only against myself. Yeah. I never came up with the line.
Yeah, you can't learn new things if your only teacher is yourself.
I first of all, I think Blue-White Siphonaut is the best deck in the abstract. I think Landstill is the best deck against the best decks. Those 2 decks would probably have been in my lineup this year. Unless I was just like I said, I might, if I were the old lineups, like where I could angle different, it'd probably be like Fluctuator, Parfait, Siphonaut, but maybe it would have been Landstill, Siphonaut, Fluctuator. I just don't enjoy playing Parfait. I'm not like you and Sam. I don't think it's fun. Maybe I would have liked Sam's hybrid
Parfait Stifle Knot deck. Maybe that's fun. Probably not. But I don't know. I love playing Lanny Rock. It's one of my favorite decks to play. I just don't think it's that good. So I probably would play Fluctuator as the other deck. Fluctuator just impresses me every single time I see it.
Yeah, and Fluctuator is extremely good against some opponents' lineups.
I mean, Osip just 8-1 the meetup this week.
Eight. Oh yeah, 8. You mean
games?
Yeah. And then
so
he's 8-0. He's 8-0 in 2 meetups, and he's literally won all 8 matches of Premodern that he's played in his life.
Yeah. So the last MFer who won 2 meetups in a row. I guess we don't count all of the ancillary meetups.
It's true.
It was me. Right?
We only count the monthly official super secret meetups. Don't count.
I guess volleyball meetups don't, because I've won every volleyball meetup too.
Yeah, volleyball meetup does count.
So in 2022, I won consecutive meetups, but since then, only Osip has won consecutive meetups, and he's never lost a match of Premodern.
Yeah.
So.
All right, moving on to Mike Arnold.
I mean, Fluctuator really is impressive to me. I think it's one of the best decks in the format. Yeah. People call it a glass cannon.
Well, let's get to it when we talk about Will. We'll talk about Will soon. We're almost there.
With a bowling ball. You want to talk about Will now?
No, we'll talk about
Alvaro Galindo.
No. We're talking about Mike Arnold. Let's real quick on Mike Arnold.
I love Mike Arnold's decks.
Triple mid range. We have this girl. We have Dead Guy Ale, and we have Secret Rock with the Jamie Wakefield 2662 special. Let's go ahead and Mike, why don't you take it away and tell us about the Jamie Wakefield special? Right, Jamie, of course, went ahead and commented that he loved the coverage and he loved the homage.
So we've been trying to get to, Brian Kowal, myself, Adrian Sullivan, Jamie Wakefield were on a team called Cabal Rogue in the late 90s. Bill Macy was on that team. There were a lot of innovative decks came out of that team. Accelerated Blue, Patrick Lennon Johnson was on our team. Necro Tinker. Tricks actually originated on that team, although none of us played it at the Pro Tour because I was playtesting IRL with Adrian, and Adrian convinced me to play Hunted Wumpus at the Pro Tour and said, although I did make day 2, so imagine there were 8 people that were defeated by Hunted Wumpus Curse Scroll. Go figure on that one. So Jamie Wakefield is the innovator of, this is not a Jamie Wakefield deck because Jamie Wakefield's rule was to play only one color. This is a rock deck that has natural order in it to get 1 Verdant Force and 1 Phantom Neshoba. But it does have the flavor of Jamie Wakefield because Mike Arnold is playing 62 cards. So I like it from that standpoint. From a flavor standpoint, I love it. This is not a playable deck, but it is. From a flavor standpoint, it is wonderful. When I say it's not a playable deck, I played Secret Force in PTQs. I helped push it to, I wrote about it a lot. It made 3 copies made top 8 of Worlds one year, I think, with Pernicious Deed. And I think they had Bayou, right? So stuff like that. But I don't think it's a playable pre-modern deck. This is clearly, if you were going to play an optimal rock deck, you wouldn't play 62 cards. Right?
Yeah. We all know that, but it's.
But I love it from the flavor standpoint.
Yeah, right? I gotta say, I don't play with any of Michael Arnold's decks. I only play against them, and I do have to say that I don't like playing decks that lose to mid-range decks. So, in general, I don't have a lot of respect for these decks. But look, I think Mike Arnold made the evaluation that this format meant that there was going to be less gaming and a little bit more just straight playing and I think he wanted to reduce variance in his matchups. It's tricky though, because I think that these 3 decks being all mid-range decks, you would think that they're unexploitable because mid-range decks are difficult to exploit, but we'll see how that plays out. I think that Alvaro
Secret can play out like a combo deck, right? So
that's why he picked it week 1 against Alvaro's Ponza deck, because he likely knew that Alvaro was going to try to attack the mana base of his triple mid-range lineup, so he picked the least vulnerable to land destruction deck that he had.
Because he's got Wall of Roots and Birds of Paradise as well as an additional 2 lands.
Yeah, the deck has 100 mana sources. I don't know exactly how many, but 4 bird for 4 walls.
Jamie said he didn't like seeing a first turn swamp, right? But the fact is, if you're playing against a Stone Rain deck, first turn swamp's fantastic. You can't get it wastelanded, but you can take their Stone Rain. So this deck has a powerful line, which is first turn swamp. Check out what your opponent's got with Cabal Therapy or Duress. If they have a removal card for Verdant Forest, take it away. Second turn, any creature, hopefully a Wall of Roots, third turn, Natural Order, get there. Also against a red deck, you just get Neshoba, and the game's pretty much over. So it plays out like a combo deck. So this is a difficult deck to exploit because it's basically the Rock, but it can exploit others, which is something that Lanny Rock can't do. Lanny Rock just plays a fair game. Like when we did the David Tao episode a few weeks ago, I was talking about like I just was trying to
can't win,
trade 1-for-1 until I could get a Haunting Echoes off, because like in one of the games I got David to nothing, literal nothing, and then I just played out like some fair creatures, and then he just untapped and killed me. From no cards in hand, no permanents in play. So I think the fact that you can put the opponent on a far faster clock, even getting like a deranged Hermit, like you could just get close to 20 power with the right sacrifice on Natural Order, because you could just get double deranged Hermit, right? And then that gives your squirrels an additional +1/+1. There's a lot of goofball stuff you can do with Recurring Nightmare, etc. The disadvantages of this build are that it's wildly less consistent. You end up blowing up your own stuff with Pernicious Deed more often. I mean, Vendetta sucks in almost every situation, and we play Vendetta, right? But like I said, it's hard to exploit, but you can exploit others. And I think that this deck is going to win more matches as a result of that.
Yeah, and we already saw that on display when on game 3 against Alvaro's Ponza, he just went ahead and turn 3 Natural Ordered for Verdant Force and couldn't lose from that spot.
Yeah,
so.
But I mean, that's also, but Alvaro's playing like literally the worst deck out of every deck in the entire PSS, which is the deck that he played, which is not a playable deck either. So Dead Guy Ale is
I do have to say that
third worst deck in the PSS.
I do have to say
it's
that
really bad.
I do have to say that I thought that Ponza would stand a chance. Like the Ponza's best chance was going to be against Mike Arnold's lineup, and it not coming through is a little unfortunate. I mean, this Ponza deck does have a lot of burn, so maybe it's good against the creature decks. But
actually,
who knows?
Maybe I take it back. Maybe Ponza's good now that they banned land tax, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, if half the format is some combination of Gush, A's, and land tax, how could you play Mana Disruption? Like, it's just like you tap. Like, you made the most spurious argument, and you whiffle waffle on this all the time. At LobsterCon, you're like, okay, I'm on the side of the heroes about land tax now. Then this past week, you're like, oh, but land destruction decks did okay at Misty. I mean, that deck was not playable.
What, like, the Terravore deck? It doesn't matter.
People get mana screwed.
Well, people
get mana screwed, and there's an overlap on that.
Two Terravore pilots putting up a positive record is like all the data that we got. I mean, it just is what it is. Like, I'm not trying to say like the argument there was like you can't play land destruction in this format. It's like, one, land destruction either blows, or it's good. Like, you can't make, like it's land tax. The presence of land tax doesn't really make land destruction a good or bad strategy. That's all that I'm saying.
Okay,
I've lost to the Terravore deck with my land still, or my land tax.
I disagree with you, but separately, the thing that I would argue about that is Premodern is a unique format from the perspective of all Magic the Gathering formats. And like, if people are playing EDH, if people are playing CDH, for example, they pretty much play 100% terrible decks, but are convinced they're competitive. If people play regular EDH, people play 100% terrible decks, but there's a range of how terrible they are. If people are playing Standard, people play 100% good decks. If people play Pioneer, people play 100% 50% decks. And if people play Modern, people play 100% polarized decks. Okay? Premodern is the only format where some people play Parfait and 12-12 on one end of the extreme, and other people play lollipops. They're like, this is a rainbow lollipop sliver theme deck. Isn't it great? Premodern. It's the only format that's like that.
Yeah, so, I mean, but then after round 4,
joke deck and hit joke decks, that happens.
After round 4, you're playing against killers, and if you can catch a couple wins with your Terravore deck, then you get there.
I mean, Tom Matelski, our friend, listmate, roommate, whatever you want to call him, has tried to get me to play Dead Guy a bunch. I have not. I actually like Mike Arnold's Tainted Packs. I have a big soft spot for Tainted Pack in my life. If you're going to play Tainted Pack, I don't think it's good in this deck.
Mike Arnold is doing it for the people. I mean, let's be honest.
Like, yeah, I mean, look,
he's playing these. He's playing the fair decks. What can you say?
So I mean, the problem is that like he might win the PSS because all of his decks can potentially win. I think of his deck's likelihood to win, the most winnable is Dark Secret at 62 cards because it can steal matches and it has a lot of the robustitude defensively of the Rock. Dead Guy Ale is a really weird deck in that I feel like if you're going to do the things that Dead Guy Ale is good at, you might as well play Black-Red instead of Black-White. Because I don't see a single reason why this deck is better than Draco Blast. The exact same angle cards like Hypnotic Spectre, Phyrexian Arena, etc. are available in Black-Red, and you can do the same secret Verdant Force action that in that deck that you could not in this deck.
Wait.
Instead,
Mike, I got the lineup. So you're telling me that the best lineup for the PSS would be Secret Force, mid-range Secret Force with combo finish. We have Draco Blast
Black-Red
with Black-Red Insidious Dreams combo finish, and Chance Encounter this girl with Frenetic Efreet and Chance Encounter. Let's lock it in. Okay.
Wow.
Live from Madison, Wisconsin, we have Sam Black joining us, actually, so we're going to pivot over to some Sam Black stuff.
Are we to finish this at a different...
Yeah, we'll finish this at a different time. Hey, Sam.
Great.
Game over.